Above the clouds, high in the Himalayas, the old Silk Road climbs through 14,000 feet to the Natula Pass, where two immense nations meet. It's here that India comes face to face with China. 40 years ago, they fought a fierce frontier war. Now, finally, the border is reopening for trade. Symbol of epic change in both countries as they dash for growth and new riches. India and China together will shape much of this century for all of us. But who will be the winners and losers as they race each other to the top of the world? I'm setting off on a journey through China and India to watch the race unfold. First Shanghai, and the Chinese sprint from the very start.
Welcome to take our Metro train.
The airport train pushes through 430 kilometers per hour, 270 miles per hour, for a mere 8-minute journey. Impressive, undoubtedly. Vitally needed, hardly. But this train is a political statement. Be amazed, be very amazed by China's rise. Once China decided it wanted the fastest train in the world, there didn't need to be any public discussion. This isn't a democracy. In a one-party state, what the government wants, the government gets. The train seems to shout to the world, "We're overtaking you all." Arriving in India is a very different story. This doesn't immediately look like a country on a dash for growth. A taxi in Mumbai, the country's commercial capital, gives me far too much time for a close-up view of slums and jams. Most of India's roads are hopelessly inadequate, part of a lousy infrastructure. But what's holding India back? Partly it's the need to persuade people in overcrowded areas like this to move out of the path of modernization. They can't be forced out of the way. It's called democracy. But how does it look to those creating the new wealth?
Hi.
Nice to meet you. What do you think would suit me?
I can do all kinds of shoes.
I like these ones. These are really smart.
Mm.
In Shanghai, Billy Wang's handmade shoes tell a powerful tale. Billy took me to his small factory, a tiny but thriving part of China's manufacturing boom. His workers copy from photos their customers' favourite shoes. It's all imitation, not innovation. The business is expanding very fast, like all Chinese manufacturing, and Mr. Wang certainly doesn't question China's system, which helps make him rich.
I'm just a shoemaker. I just worry about my shoes. Nothing else matters to me. I just want to make good shoes.
How much does your business and your future success depend on China's government?
According to the Chinese way of thinking, the political system is decisive. Everything else comes second to this.
And that's the message big picture China tells you too. In the new Shanghai, with its soaring temples of capitalism, the fast track to wealth has been produced by a rigid political system, communist in name only now. Shanghai's international port is part of national success built on an unwritten deal. Business stays out of politics, especially when the political system delivers so much. The port director told me he's immensely proud of what's been achieved.
This area is for refrigerated containers. Over there, those are for hazardous materials. Most of these are for normal dry goods. This whole port was built in 1990. Every year, we're growing by 25%.
More than that, it's largely one-way traffic here. China doesn't buy much overseas, but produces vast quantities of goods for sale. China's achievement is simply staggering. Single-minded, one-party government making clear decisions which mean that China dominates the export world. It's staggering to watch this. Containers coming on and off ships simultaneously, most of them coming into China empty, most of them going out crammed with Chinese exports. This isn't something that should worry just India. It worries economies across the world. A huge trade imbalance.
Basically, we have a lot of construction going on right now just before the monsoons.
But in India, young risk-takers are not dismayed by China's success. The story of Tarun Tadani in Mumbai is typical.
All our designs are basically finalized.
Tarun is a man in a hurry to share in India's consumer boom, happening now. Tarun, still only 22, cut short studies in America to create this fashion accessories business. And the emphasis here in his design room, unlike China, is on innovation, not imitation.
Here is all our new production.
Next door in the workshop, a small team churns out low-cost fashion accessories for eager buyers among India's spreading middle class. Tarun insists India's cheap labour, combined with superior design skills, make a winning formula.
We never copy directly. We spend so much time, consistently trying to make new products, new designs, new things out there, finding new trends, just keep developing in new styles.
So is this an exciting time to be doing business in India?
It's an exciting time because you can see things happening, India is moving very fast, but it's like a boat. But if we can sail or we can even sink. I can't speak for the future, but I can definitely say it is definitely bright. It's a good path, and I think we are on the right track.
And big picture India? Well, that stress on skills drives heavy industry too. Here at Mukand Steel, they can't compete with China's bulk, bog-standard production. Instead, they make only high-value specialist steels, meeting Europe's most exacting standards. I'll tell you, life does not get hotter than this. At the heart of a steelworks in India, midsummer, it's almost unbearable. But the Indians are justifiably proud of what they're doing here, not just competing with huge producers like China with a massive output of bulk commodity steel, but here making some of the world's finest high-grade steel, competing with anything that could be produced in other parts of the industrialized world. Most of this steel meets India's enormous demands, but also goes for export. This is an area of heavy industry where India sees opportunities for massive growth over the next 10 or 15 years, and where the Indians are convinced they have a huge edge over China. Outside, away from the intense heat, I hear some fighting talk from the marketing director. India can catch up and then overtake China.
And I don't think China can sustain this kind of high growth rate here for next 3 to 5 years.
Is India
While India's growth rate for last year was 8.5% GDP, the current year has begun with 9.5% in first 2 months. And I think as we go along, we see acceleration of the growth rate as all the industry segments are growing simultaneously. So we expect at least to close up the gap between China and India in next 3 to 5 years.
And that optimism, justified or not, fits with a confident mood in Mumbai, seaside city of property prices going sky high, where Tarun Tadani, the entrepreneur, is just one of thousands out to enjoy the good times. You can see more of India's potential strengths at the cinema too. Freedom for its people, freedom of expression, and in politics. Tarun thrives on ideas, and at the cinema he can choose between India's best Bollywood films and anything else from around the world. Could democracy prove a winner? In stark contrast, for Billy Wang, the Shanghai shoemaker, for all China's people, freedom is heavily restricted. Film, newspapers, the internet, all strictly controlled. Any dissent is punished harshly, but if a growing middle class demands freedom to match rising wealth, then China will hit real trouble. But for now, Billy Wang and China's hugely expanding middle class seem largely content, as far as one can tell. Economic growth must come first. Let's not jump from the known, a one-party state, to the unknown, democracy.
I think we can't really jump, to another side. I think the best thing or the better strategy, for the government today here is that to maintain the momentum for economic growth. and your creation of the middle class, or you created more job opportunity for most of the people, and also the reduction of the poverty or something like that. And then I think the party themselves respond, to the growing demand, from the middle class, from the society. I think there is a way out eventually.
Back in India, you can see how people might question what democracy has done for them. The country still looks creaky, antiquated, under-equipped. But if India is moving slower than China, most Indians I spoke to see their democracy as a big long-term asset, a winner over time. And the fact these trains are so overcrowded with people on their way to work points to another intriguing possibility. With its population growing twice as fast as China's, India may actually be in better shape for the next stages in the race. India's huge and expanding population used to be seen as a burden to this country, a brake on its phenomenal growth, simply too many mouths to feed. Not anymore. There's been a radical rethink. Instead, it's China which may have the problem with a stable but aging population. This vibrant young country is seen pulling huge numbers of people into an expanding working population, able to fuel phenomenal growth in the years to come. It's now being seen within India that when its population passes that of China, it may actually give it a winning edge in the race to the top of the world. Leaving the cities of India and China behind, I'm travelling into the countryside to see how the race to the top of the world looks in the vast interior of each country. It's here that the majority of both India and China's people struggle to survive off the land. As the two countries compete for future dominance of the world economy, both face huge challenges to ensure the hundreds of millions of people in their rural population are not left out of the growing prosperity. For now, far too many people, especially in India, are trapped in relentless poverty which excludes them from the new wealth. Bhagyama is one of India's many farm widows. She and her daughter struggle to survive. This part of Andhra Pradesh, dogged by drought, offers very little to sustain farming communities. Bhagyama's husband followed an all too frequent path here. He drank pesticide to escape crop failure.
He couldn't pay his debts. He didn't know what to do. That's why he killed himself. I'm so desperate. We may end up doing the same.
But surely there must be some chance your daughters will have a better life.
My children will also have to be labourers like me because there are no opportunities here. I hope to get them married, but I don't have the money for the dowry. I can't afford it, and I have no support from my family.
And India's answer to Bhagyama's plight? Well, she's now joined a huge government job creation scheme, guaranteeing her 100 days' pay each year. But for India as a whole, more radical solutions are needed, giving people new skills and persuading them to leave the land and fill jobs in industry instead. China has pursued that path with much greater vigour. This is just one rural household turned upside down by a radical and divisive policy. It's delivering real results and shifting tens of thousands out of the fields, but at considerable cost. Tsai Jin-fu has only a few days left to work his land. The Chinese authorities are taking it to make way for a new factory. He and his wife took me to the edge of his fields where rubble is all that remains of their neighbours' homes. This whole village is being destroyed, like so many others across China. But Mr. Tsai says he's willing to move with the compensation they've been offered.
I will miss the land, of course. Without the land to farm, I will just have to give up farming and enjoy life.
But other farmers are angry. This man saw us filming and came over to pour out his resentment, well aware public protest in China is risky.
We're
all unhappy, he told me. What's there to be happy about? They gave us a much smaller place and very little money. But nothing stops the demolitions. China's government is convinced industrialization must go ahead, even at the risk of rural revolt. You can actually watch as China's growing number of factories push deeper and deeper into the countryside. It can feel as if this country is one vast building site being torn down and rebuilt. This is just one of countless farm villages which has been razed to the ground. All the farmers and their families pushed, willingly or unwillingly, off the land to join the growing army of the urban working population. It's difficult to know how they feel about it. Very few speak out openly. But you get a very strong sense of the anger and resentment from the figures that, extraordinarily, the Chinese authorities themselves have published. Last year alone, they recorded some 87,000 incidents of protest, unrest, disturbance. That's more than 1,600 a week. So there's no question of the anger and bitterness that's been caused, but there's no question also of the fact that China's rural face has been changed forever. The time has come. Mr. and Mrs. Tsai and their grandson are about to move into their new government-provided home, now almost complete. The 19-year-old is excited by the transformation of China, the future possibilities opening up for him.
Life for my father and the grandfather's generations can be described in just one word: hard. My generation are going to study and learn skills, then we can get easier jobs.
Education is a key focus for China. It really needs to be. The country has too few children as a result of the strict one-child-per-family policy. And that means a dwindling workforce. So tomorrow's workers have to be given the best possible skills. I can't pretend to be able to follow this lesson, but what I have learned from both China and from India is that education is the key to their future greatness. Many of the children here from local villages are getting off to a flying start with better resources than in India. But for China to stay ahead, education still has to be improved at every level, from primary through secondary and beyond.
Sing, cry, louder, louder.
And China is struggling against another handicap: the urgent need to learn English, today's global language. The method may seem bizarre, but it's hard not to admire the sense of a whole nation slogging to get to the top of the world.
At the moment, English plays an important part in China's economic prosperity. It is the basic tool for international communication. As we improve our English skills, China will be able to interact with the rest of the world even more.
Indian education faces quite different challenges. The absolute priority in the villages here is fighting poverty. And fighting poverty means giving children skills which could lift them to jobs inside India's urban-led boom. An escape route from very low wages working the land. What would you spend it on? As it is, the headmaster sometimes despairs at the risk of perpetual poverty here.
Because uneducated parents, they are not sending their children properly to the school. Absent is their children absent is one. They are At least continuously, nearly 10 to 15 days they are absenting. By that way, we will not understand lessons properly.
But if they get better educated, will that give them a different chance in life than their parents? I mean, is the future for them better?
Definitely, sir. Definitely.
Now look at this. Still India, but the contrast could hardly be more extreme. This is the breath-catching campus in Bangalore of Infosys, India's own homegrown software giant, and a major contributor to India's explosive growth.
We have a faculty of 180 people who are faculties in computer science. This is possibly the largest computer science faculty anywhere in the world.
Mohandas Pai, Infosys director, is showing me a vision of India's future. And the biggest emphasis of all here, no question, it's on teaching. Taking the highest achievers among India's college leavers to even greater heights. They see no limits to the country's future or their own.
I want to leave a mark. I'm looking at making a difference somewhere down the line. It's not like everything is already done. So there's so much that's yet to be discovered, there's yet to be tapped. So that way, there's a lot of scope to make a difference.
Is this an exciting time to be living in India?
Definitely. I think this is the best time. There's never been a better time here.
All that enthusiasm Mr. Pai shares, but he's also realistic. India is being outrun by China. His hope, India can catch up.
But the fact remains, China has lifted the largest number of people out of poverty in the shortest possible of time. There is no parallel in human history to what China has done. There will be no parallel in human history to what India has done. Because these two countries don't fit in with the notion of the rest of the world. They are 40% of the world. And if 40% of the world does well, the balance 60% will naturally do very well.
So, for both India and China, in their race to the top of the world, the heights of achievement seem to beckon. And for me, at the end of this journey, there's no better place than the Natula Pass in the Himalayas, where the two countries meet to try to glimpse their future. With China and India face to face, we can look into the future, but we can't see it clearly. What we can be certain of is this, that both these great countries are building and building fast. The changes in their economies are going to change the lives of 1 billion people in India, more than 1 billion people in China. But far more profound than that, the world order is going to be transformed. We may see a time when the United States goes into at least partial eclipse. The giants of Asia are on the move and on the rise. Above the clouds, high in the Himalayas, the old Silk Road climbs through 14,000 feet to the Natula Pass, where two immense nations meet. It's here that India comes face to face with China. 40 years ago, they fought a fierce frontier war. Now, finally, the border is reopening for trade. Symbol of epic change in both countries as they dash for growth and new riches. India and China together will shape much of this century for all of us. But who will be the winners and losers as they race each other to the top of the world? I'm setting off on a journey through China and India to watch the race unfold. First Shanghai, and the Chinese sprint from the very start.
Welcome to Takeoff Manufacturing.
The airport train pushes through 430 kilometers per hour, 270 miles per hour, for a mere 8-minute journey. Impressive, undoubtedly. Vitally needed, hardly. But this train is a political...
Of shoes.
I like these ones. These are really smart.
Mm.
In Shanghai, Billy Wang's handmade shoes tell a powerful tale. Billy took me to his small factory, a tiny but thriving part of China's manufacturing boom. His workers copy from photos their customers' favourite shoes. It's all imitation, not innovation. The business is expanding very fast, like all Chinese manufacturing, and Mr. Wang certainly doesn't question China's system, which helps make a close-up view of slums and jams. Most of India's roads are hopelessly inadequate, part of a lousy infrastructure. But what's holding India back? Partly it's the need to persuade people in overcrowded areas like this to move out of the path of modernisation. They can't be forced out of the way. It's called democracy. But how does it look to those creating the new wealth?
Hi.
Nice to meet you.
What
do you think would suit me?
I can do a
statement. Be amazed, be very amazed by China's rise. Once China decided it wanted the fastest train in the world, there didn't need to be any public discussion. This isn't a democracy. In a one-party state, what the government wants, the government gets. The train seems to shout to the world, we're overtaking you all. Arriving in India is a very different story. This doesn't immediately look like a country on a dash for growth. A taxi in Mumbai, the country's commercial capital, gives me far too much time for a